Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Promised Neverland manga review. This one's going to be for chapter 142, and this one is called The Promise from 1,000 Years Ago Part 2. So yeah, this is a very interesting chapter because it reveals kind of some stuff we've been waiting for it to reveal, but also just continuing on from last chapter. So we get some stuff in the past. And I think what's most interesting about it is how fast-paced it is. We pretty much get straight to the point. This doesn't seem like it's going to be this extraordinarily long sequence of chapters of I don't think we'll be going into like part 10, 11, 12. So I actually kind of appreciate that you know what they're not doing here is actually revealing us names of characters. They're just pretty much like, you know, the Rattray clan, this is Julius Rattray, the guy who kind of caused all of this. You can visually see that these other characters are the ancestors of like Emma, Ray, Norman, and so on. That this is like effectively every character you saw in Gracefield House is kind of descended from these characters, plus I assume some other humans along the way as well. You don't need to necessarily know their names right now. Maybe later on they'll reveal that and create a significance behind like what, you know, clan they come from. But it's more of just presenting the idea of, you know, Rattray, the Rattray clan, which now sort of facilitates the Promise being the way it is right now, used to be a comrade of the ancestors of the people who you know, go on to basically all the cattle children effectively are from. And I think it's just confirming some of these kind of interesting dynamics to us that I think really works. But let's get into the chapter anyway, and we'll discuss the details as they happen. So this is where our other characters are descendants, basically the ancestors of Emma and so on. They get a report basically saying that Archduke Luvis has appeared in the Southwest Forest, and that the Rattray force's stronghold has been annihilated, and that it's almost likely that Rattray is gone as well. So they rush into action, but Rattray suddenly appears at the door. And they're happy to see him, they're wondering what's going on. And he just says, I have something I'd like you to hear right away. And so they round table again on the floor. You want us to reconsider that proposal from last chapter, basically the idea of giving over effectively like criminals to the demons to create some type of peace, but give them food. And that's what they're kind of discussing once again with this. So he says, but if we present them once, that will be the end of it. We have this method which, by doing so just once, we can sever interactions with them for eternity. And we get that he says, this is certainly preferable to losing thousands or 10,000 soldiers and people onwards. I've had enough with sacrificing. And it's an interesting thing because you don't really consider Julius Rattray as a complete villain in this chapter, but you are not meant to look, I think, on him overly favorably, because, you know, that line there, it's you know, it's a notable panel there. I've had enough with sacrificing. But what is he doing? He is sacrificing people over to the demons to create this promise. And you can see here that he's making these decisions in part because of just how vicious the Luvis attack was. He says, in just one night, we were all wiped out. If we offer up a small amount, all this sacrifice will end right there and then. And the others kind of stand up to argue and say, you know, if we can't do this, the mindless bloodshed will never end. That's what he says. They all try and argue with him, but he just kind of speaks over them. We have to finish this for the sake of mankind. Not soon, not someday, but right here, right now, all of us. It is certainly a painful choice to make, but this is a constructive compromise. It's a price we must pay. I beg of you, everyone, please accept this plan. This is when our Norman descendant, the woman, speaks up. What about all of the suffering that will happen to those we offer up? Will their offspring, generation after generation, follow after them? All for the sake of our peace, the pain and suffering they have to shoulder will just continue to swell with this one singular decision. And that is making it very clear that this is the scene that all but effectively reveals to us. These characters do go on, their offspring becomes the cattle children. Like Emma is descended from all of these characters, Norman, Ray. That is exactly what is about to happen. And she's presenting the point of view of like, this seems to be the most logical thing ever, but you're not thinking about how this will go once we hand those people over. We are gaining peace, but we are giving these people away to live lives, their children, their offspring, to just have the exact same lives effectively as cattle, because they'll want them to breed so they can have more, so their food supply basically never ends. Whereas I think Rattray is just considering like, oh, we'll just give them some humans and that'll be that. And it's presenting the point of view, and she finishes up by saying very clearly, bluntly, is that not the case? And everyone realizes that it's true. Our kind of Ray descendant kind of says, I've lost many soldiers too. My father and brother were eaten. All the others lost their families as well. Countless numbers of my comrades have been eaten by them. The other guy says, but even so, you and all of us here, haven't we been fighting all this time for the future that we want? Even though all of the losses, all they've robbed us of, haven't we come this far together because we haven't given up? Rattray freaks out, saying, stop it, you're wrong. Those pretty words and those illusions, I'm fed up with all of them. What's so wrong with casting away some strangers for the sake of my comrades? I'm doing the right thing. And then our Emma ancestor says, then why do you look like you're in so much pain, Julius? I know that you don't want to cast them away either. You think about your nation and your troops more than anyone else. You're straightforward and kind, and for that reason you feel much more responsibility for others and push on all ahead by yourself. But weren't you the one who wanted it more than anyone else? Peace for all mankind, victory without compromise. I'm sorry that you've had to suffer all alone, but for your sake too, we just can't accept that proposal. What you need right now is rest. You must be exhausted. Rest up a little. And he freaks out at this point in time, and this is where we begin to get the idea of like, okay, he's being very kind of emotional here. It's a heart-to-heart. But then you remember back to last chapter, he directly offered some sort of a deal. He wanted to see the Demon King. And that's obviously happened since then now. So the reveal, I suppose, of the truth of this is going to come out now. So Rattray says, you're wrong, this is the very best peace we can achieve. I want to reach an understanding with all of you. If I can just get you to consent to this. And someone appears in the shadows behind him and says, I see, no matter what I do, you won't change your minds. It's a shame, but honestly, what a shame. And then suddenly we see that he's brought demons with him, and they appear behind him, and this is the betrayal that has happened here. The Emma kind of ancestor says, Julius, you betrayed us. And the demons just immediately take them captive. They don't eat them, but they have them there in their hands. They've taken them. And Julius reveals, I've already reached an agreement with their king. And we see a flashback to the king of the demons saying, not bad at all. If we seize control of our food source, we can command and govern our subjects more effectively. We will agree to your peace. Julius says, please forgive me, there was no other way. You've become an obstacle towards peace. Therefore, as much as it pains me to do this, you are humanity's first cattle. So there it is, the cattle word, that's the theme that they're going for here. And we see the Norman ancestor, the Ray ancestor, and the Emma ancestor like focused in on the screen here. They are taken in as the first, cattle as part of the promise. And Julius, who is clearly snapped at this point, says, now, go on and become a foundation for peace. And I suppose this is him kind of explaining to himself, it's okay, this was the sole correct path. Somebody has to end up being the victim. Somebody has to be the one to finish this. It's over now. The human world will be saved. I've saved it. As we see him kind of flashing back to his kind of time with his comrades, all the nice times. And it's him just about to go in to make the promise, and then he remembers back to the Emma ancestors, like the last look that I suppose he saw from him, and it was him sort of, I suppose it's kind of a smile in a way on the face as this betrayal has happened, and it's just the sort of lies in a way he's telling himself to justify all of this. So we see the promise here. We have the one, and then the demon representative and the human representative for the first promise from 1,000 years ago. And he says, the one says, "You want the world to be divided into two. Okay, I'll grant your wish. However, I will request a reward as well." And this is when they again get across this idea that it's one of the rules for dealing with the one, that no matter what he wants, don't refuse the reward that he offers. So the one decides on his request, and he says, "First, Iverk, who's the demon representative from you, I would like the finest meat you will ever grow. You can make them, right? Humans, at farms. I want to eat better meat than you or your king ever would." And he agrees to this. He says, "I understand." Now then, next up is Julius. For you, and Julius to himself is basically saying, "Whatever it takes, even if I must offer my life, I'll accept this." And the one says, "From now on, you will be the gatekeeper." And he's kind of shocked that this is it. That's not a sacrifice type thing. Your role will be that of mediator. You are to preserve peace between the two worlds. The promise that you and the king made, you are not to break each other's customs. If the human side doesn't play a part, you wouldn't be able to rest assured, right? So your clan, who are humans, will play that role forever. You and your offspring, generation after generation, will be stuck in that vortex of fate. You can't escape from the friends that you tossed away, nor from your own fate. You too will become a foundation for peace. And that's the kind of flashback for this chapter. And it's just presenting this idea of, in a way, just like the people he betrayed were kind of forced into this fate of to become the first, cattle of humanity to provide the food source for demons with the promise. Rattray, his sort of curse for making this, play, is that his clan is forever sort of cursed to always be involved in this. They are the ones directly, the humans, making sure that the demons have humans and can, have their food source running effectively. They are the ones who have to keep the promise intact. You made this promise. You gave these specific humans over to them to become their food source. You have to make sure it remains the same. And that's the thing. The idea that he can never forget what he did. He is always going to be forever reminded of this betrayal that he made. And I think that's interesting in terms of characterizing the one. Like, what he asked for from the demons was very much something sort of for himself. There was a little bit of, like, I am above even the king of the demons, you will give me your finest food that not even the king would eat. It's a kind of almost like selfish thing in a way. But then what he asked from Julius is kind of like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead with this promise, but from you, I want to basically kind of curse you so that you will forever be in kind of, pain and agony. So this is almost this sense of like, he is aware that Julius kind of committed this kind of like deep sort of sin. What he did was like so wrong, betraying his people, that he's like, not even for himself, which is like he's always been talking about, I want a reward for myself. But his reward from Julius is actually that, no, you will play the role of keeping this promise intact. And sure, it sort of benefits him in that the promise, like Julius performing that role allows the Tefari kind of offering for him, the finest meat ever, to be provided to him constantly. But still, it asks you to kind of think about what way you are meant to interpret the one. Of, is he just this demon like everyone else, or is there something more to him in terms of what he's asking? Does he actually have an opinion on what they ask of him, or what? Because he's clearly, like, I suppose the question is, like, is he a demon? I think, have they ever said, like, he's the one, like, above the demons, I think is one of the phrasings that they used of it. And the fact that he wants to eat the meat of humans, like, I think gets that impression. But why is he, like, magical in a way? Like, of course, they're in the past the seven walls, so there's crazy stuff going on. But, like, it's going to beg the question as we get into this last few pages of, once they agree to a promise, is it just a magical thing where it's like snap of the fingers and the promise just happens? Or what? Is it just an agreement of him as being the, like, ruler above all rulers? No one will go against him, so it will just happen? Or is it like magically he's able to make something happen? That's the ultimate question I suppose you'd have with him. But here, anyway, we get Emma. Go back to Emma. So the one says, "Sure, Emma, what is your wish? However, I will request a reward as well." And And so this is where Emma's like, okay, the reward, I know about this. You know, Minerva's pen talked about that. But with such simple-mindedness, he really does seem like a kid. An existence of a higher dimension that has transcended time and space. Who at one time divided the human and demon worlds. What is he thinking of? What does he want? I can't read him at all. Almost like some fickle god. And he says, the reward, it would have to be something important. Their ambition, their desire, what they long for. What I would want is something that is important to the other party. And Emma's sort of shocked by this, like he's actually thinking it through here. Will you make a wish despite that? What do you wish for? And this is where Emma has a flashback to the discussion that they had about how exactly they would go about wording the promise to get exactly what they want in the most simple and effective, possibility. So there's 3 rules here about making the promise. Promises made with the One cannot be overridden. Promises made with the One cannot be broken, and you must absolutely not refuse him his reward. So this is Ray talking here. He says, in the promise from 1,000 years ago, the world was divided. Based on that, our wish will be quite simple. Just 2 things. My wish is, I want all cattle children to cross over to the human world, and after that for it to be completely impossible to pass between the 2 worlds. I think you get the impression here that like he's a bit shocked by this. So he's just kind of like, But he says, I will grant that wish. And the sort of tagline is, but at what price? So what is he going to ask for in exchange for making this promise that he says he's fine with? He will make it happen. But it's interesting, though, that this is the promise. This is what we've been waiting for so many chapters. What would they specifically word it as? And it feels like very simple given all of the discussion that especially they were having with Norman about, the right way to do things, the wrong way to do things. For it to be as simple as all of the cattle children to be transferred over to the human world and then lock down the border basically between worlds. Now, it obviously doesn't deal with the fact of like, wait, the demons still need some sort of food source. Where are they getting that from? And why doesn't the promise include anything relating to like Sanju and Mujika, making sure the demons get their blood so that they won't ever need to eat humans or anything like that? Maybe they've thought it through and there's this extra side of the plan of like, there's a certain amount of what we want that we can like accomplish on our own, but in terms of what he needs to do for us, this is actually all we need. So if we make it simple, he might not ask for something overly crazy as a reward, and then we can do a lot of it ourselves. Maybe that's what they're talking about here. But I think they're also referring to the whole idea of promises made with the One cannot be overridden. So I suppose they're saying that they're almost taking it as that, like, okay, the previous promise was to separate the world in 2. So we can't ask for that promise to just be like completely, broken effectively. I can't ask for the border to go away and to go back to one world because that would be directly overriding a previous promise and that can't happen. So they're sort of accepting that the world is going to remain 2. That's the way it has to be. But what if we just lock the border to where, yeah, it's 2 worlds, but now there is no way to actually pass between them. It'll just be humans and demons separated, and we've accomplished the task of basically putting all humans onto the middle side of things. But there's also the whole idea of the Rattray clan are meant to be the mediators, and I suppose that means they're on the demon side of things, so that I suppose the Rattray clan, that puts them as being the only like humans on the demon side of the border. Again, there's a lot of like nuance that has to come into play depending on how much importance you place on all of these rules. So promises can't be broken with him. So that means like if they stopped at Tefari, something bad is going to happen because it is a promise with the demons that they are meant to supply him with a food like greater than anything else. So if they stopped the Tefari from happening, that is technically a broken promise. And then I suppose that there's a reason that they've set up the idea of refusing the reward, in that I assume Emma probably will refuse whatever reward is asked for here. Because I think she'd be willing to basically sacrifice herself for this. I think that's the impression I get. So I think more than likely, based on what he said to her, which was it would have to be something important ambition, desire, what they long for, something important to the other party. So he's kind of saying something important to Emma, or just, you know, that group, the cattle children, I suppose. You know, what is important to them that he can like take from them as a reward in exchange for what he's going to accomplish. That's interesting. Like, what you'd think probably is that what he seems to want above everything else is like the highest grade meat, to at least try it, and that would be Emma, Ray, or Norman. Emma's there. I don't think it will be him asking for her, because I think she would accept that on the spot, just because I think that's who Emma is. As much as she wants to see the world in a better place, I think she would sacrifice herself. Norman is, I think, an interesting decision if they did that, in that he is going down this kind of darker path. He's doing stuff that's going to mess with some of the promises coming up. We'll have to wait and see exactly on what happens with that. Ray is an option, but I think the fact that the one already talked about, like, Ray, like, he wasn't quite good enough to get here, but he was okay. To me, that makes me lean more towards Norman, that Ray isn't a factor here. So to me, it's like that, or he's going to ask for something that she can't accomplish, something that will get in the way of, you know, her ultimate desires to save everyone, or as many people as possible, something that will kind of prevent that from happening. It seems like he sort of always asks for something that will like frustrate the person asking for it, so that they don't get exactly what they want. Like with the demons, like you'll have all this, you can make all the food that you want, but the best of the best will always be given to me, is like the kind of caveat there, and that might frustrate the demons. With James Rattray, it was like, you're allowed to live, and your clan, your offspring going forward will live, but you'll always be reminded of what you did. So what will it be for Emma? And I think a lot of people have already predicted that. Will it be just that, what if you're the only person not allowed to cross over? What if you have to stay on the demon side of things? And that means you can't ever go to the human world, but everyone else can. What about that? So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of nuance here. I think this is definitely a tough kind of thing to do for the writer, to finally reveal what her promise is, what is being asked here, and have it just be like a big enough reveal, in that it's ultimately, like if you said to people multiple chapters ago when the first idea of this was brought up that this would be her promise, everyone would be like, okay, that seems reasonable, but it's nothing exciting as such. But the big thing going forward now is going to be what is the reward he asks for, and will Emma agree to it? And then if she doesn't, what happens? Because they're setting up some sort of a threat here, that the one is, you know, you don't mess with him. He'll talk to you, he'll be relatively nice with you, he'll be a bit all over the place with some of his meaning, but he's not inherently this kind of vicious character from the get-go. But if you break one of those rules about overriding promises, breaking the promises, or refusing the reward, what will actually happen? Like, I think because it's Emma, you're almost expecting that, like, will she find some sort of a way to, like, come up with the ultimate, like, promise or answer to the reward, to where nothing has to happen, or what? Like I said, I still feel we need to learn more about who he is to kind of explain some things, but it's a very interesting position we're placed in here. I think we'll get a few more of these chapters, you know, about the promise from 1,000 years ago, because I think they will directly set up just, I suppose, the initial formation of the farms, the role of the Rattray clan, and where it is going forward, just to, you know, fully establish some of that stuff. Maybe explain, I probably actually most importantly, is how were the worlds separated? Because they're making everything they said about crossing over to the human world has always been that, like, it's some form of, like, magical barrier that you have to pass through, that you have to go into the place with the water that's not wet, the kind of golden water, or whatever it was, that you have to go into this special elevator, and, like, it's almost like dimensional transport, that, like, the two worlds are like dimensionally separated at this point, but there is ways to pass through at like the farms and stuff like that. But you know, that's just some of the details I think they need to get into at some point. But yeah, that's my thoughts on chapter 142 of The Promised Neverland. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter, and especially the fact that we finally find out what Emma's promise is, what she wants. But what are your thoughts on that? But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.